in the beginning, I didn't realize how deep my knowledge was. And so I was sharing these videos and people being like, that's nice, but how on earth do you do that? And so I didn't realize that just demoing a thing was not actually showing someone how to do the thing. So those comments and questions that would come in on YouTube are going to keep feeding. I was like, oh, wow, there's lots of content to produce here. So I could probably have content ideas forever. So YouTube was definitely primarily the way I could at least demonstrate my thinking. And then Twitter became a really great way to show sort of beautiful visual screen caps of what these spaces looked like. And so I could just post something on Twitter and being like, here's how I do my weekly review, show these really beautiful screenshots. And people were like, how do you build this? And I was like, you can learn more about my course over here.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Bootstrap Founder. Today, I'm talking to Marie Poulin and Benjamin Borowski, the people behind Notion Mastery. We chat about building a community-based course and keeping it up to date, partnering with a company like Notion, and how to build a business around an info product like this. Here are Marie and Benjamin. I moved to Canada last year, and for the first time, I have a backyard. I have a house and a little backyard, and I started a little garden, and I enjoyed a fine harvest from that garden. And now I know that both of you are very interested in permaculture, out of all things. And it sounds like there's something in there, not just for people who like gardening, but also for founders, SaaS founders in particular, who want to build like calm and sustainable businesses. What can we learn from permaculture?
Oh my gosh, where to begin? I feel like when I took my permaculture course, it completely changed the way I looked at every part of our business, because you're looking at where are you getting the most return for the time that you're putting in, right? It's all about obtaining a yield. So it just had us looking at our services in a different way. Like, where are we spending so much of our time, energy, and attention on the stuff that is kind of giving us very little back, not just financially, but in terms of our own enjoyment. So we just started looking at things in terms of energy inputs and outputs and just being a little bit more mindful about that. So I feel like it just kind of had us slowing down a little bit and like really looking at things a little bit more from an energetic standpoint. So I think there's just lots of fun little principles and lessons that I'm like, it's a garden lesson, but it's very much applicable to business. So there's lots of stuff like that I think has subconsciously permeated our business. Ben, I'm curious if there was like anything specific. And
I think I don't remember what the context was, but I was telling the story about Marie doing this permaculture diploma on the coast where we live, on the Sunshine Coast in British Columbia. There's a lot of people who kind of set up their homes for like really, really sustainable practices. And one thing that really kind of blew my mind when I went and visited Marie while she was doing these trainings is I went in and I think about, like, when I look at somebody's beautifully curated garden on, say, like Pinterest, or you see these like gorgeous landscapes on Instagram, a lot of these places were very, very, very messy. Just, dirt everywhere, dug holes. They're running water pipelines underneath to get water and stuff to the place that it needs to go. They've got like fish farms, so the water is like, they're feeding the fish with something from the garden, and then the fish, their waste goes to then fertilize something else. So it's these little mini ecosystems. And I was kind of like, oh, like there's something really, really beautifully productive about this horribly ugly like garden, and when you look at it, it's just a total mess, but it's so productive. It's making so much food for so many people and in the community and things like that. And it kind of made me rethink the way that we think about this very glossy, like finished SaaS product. At the time we had a course launching SaaS called Doki, which we've shut down in the past year or so to focus on something different. But it made us like look at the way that we actually create products as like, you can make these kind of unfinished, messy things, and then there's like a yield that comes out of that product, and then you can use that, the experiments that you're doing there in some other way. And from the outside, it often looks like this really cacophonous mess of experiments, and it might be like to outsiders like, I don't know about that, but it's really can be quite productive underneath the surface. So yeah, I think I'm not as big, and Marie did the permaculture diploma, but I started seeing those similar patterns in our own work, and actually Marie did a talk at MicroConf a few years back, specifically around permaculture, and there may be somewhere online you can see that, but it was a really wonderful talk.
Yeah, I find that incredibly exciting. Not just because I'm starting to get into gardening, but because I've seen so many businesses, SaaS businesses, both as clients of mine or mentees of mine or my own. And I've seen them just develop from something really ugly into something still not beautiful, but less ugly, but that made them profitable, right? The fact that you don't focus on the shiny outside veneer and the kind of the flashy highlight reel of only the best kind of things, but you actually look at the meaningful, the meat of the thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if that is a good phrase for the gardening metaphor here, but it's just kind of agricultural in some way. Like you focus on what the essence of the thing is, and how you can use that essence to be a kind of self-perpetuating system. And I love the idea that you brought up aquaponics, like the idea of having fish and having, the fish. I remember this when I was in Berlin, back in Germany. I was trying to build a marketplace for local food as a business with a couple friends. Didn't go anywhere, really, unfortunately, because, we messed up. But it was very interesting to work with the farmers, the local farmers in the farming community in Berlin, where you would think this is a big city, there isn't much farming going on, but aquaponics, that can happen in a greenhouse. And we found a lot of these very interesting cyclical ecosystems in the middle of the city where you would not expect them. And we were touring them because we were trying to build a local food business, essentially involving those farmers and people who would buy the food that they create. And it was incredible. And that also shifted my mindset on how systems work, right? Systems aren't just the thing you get to see. Systems are the process that makes the thing happen that you get to see, which is an obvious statement maybe, but it took that particular kind of cyclical thing that was literally growing carrots on top of a tank of like the fish, like some African kind of river-dwelling fish that was particularly good at using the nutrients that came in from the soil. And it took me to see this to understand how systems work. And I'm excited to talk to you today, particularly because the product that I know you from most recently is essentially an organizational system building system on top of Notion. Can you talk to me a bit about Notion Mastery? Because I feel this is something that many Notion users should be aware of, but are not.
Yeah, I mean, Notion Mastery evolved out of my own need to create systems for myself. And I've shared this before. I have ADHD. I've been a very chaotic person, I think, most of my life, and have always sought structures and sort of systems and getting things done and reading every book about systems. I think I kind of obsessed over systems because it didn't make sense to me, or I didn't really understand how some things just seemed so easy for people and they could do what they say they're going to do and they could follow the GTD method. And even Ben is a very systematic person. He's a development background, the programmer brain, like he sees things very differently and can follow step-by-step instructions and see the order of things in a way that I don't. So I was always trying to find the structure for myself and something that would kind of work for the way that my brain works. And it wasn't until I found Notion that I was like, oh, I can actually show data in the way that it works for my brain and in a more visual way. I think I need to see things visually, and sometimes I just need to see it in a particular way for it to click for me. And what I realized in that process was a lot of people are the same way too. And we have a very large portion of people with ADHD in our course. And it was kind of an interesting indicator. I didn't know I had ADHD until like these people that were coming in the onboarding surveys, they kept saying, oh, I have ADHD. And I saw your videos and I really liked the style of your systems, or I really liked the way you assemble things. And so there was just such an unusual amount of people. I thought there's something here about this. Like, what is it that there seems to be a certain type of person that leans toward this very visual system and visual structure. So that actually kind of prompted me to explore diagnosis. I was like, there's got to be an interesting reason that people are kind of drawn toward my way of doing things. So obviously I've been very influenced by Ben over the years too, because he again, just has a very systematic way of looking at things. And I was like, why is this so difficult for me? So one of the things we did a few years ago was start to move our systems out of the things that we were using. Like, I think, Ben, we were using Asana at the time for project management. I was using Evernote for many years for my note taking, but everything felt very scattered and very sort of spread across too many different points of technology. So doing strategic planning was happening over here, and to-dos and notes, and I just felt very stretched thin, and I just felt very messy, and I'm already just a naturally messy person. So Notion became this place where, okay, I can kind of have my finger on the pulse of where everything is happening in one place. And that one change of that sort of, it's a permaculture principle, but integration over segregation was so helpful for me personally. I just got so excited singing it from the rooftops, I'm like, people need to know about this. I got so excited about it. And it really resonated with people and kind of took off in a way that I was not expecting. And at the time, I think, Ben, you would have just been working for Precision Nutrition right when I had launched the course, and it kind of took off. And so, Ben was doing engineering over here at Precision Nutrition. I was working on the course, and it just got to the point where I was like, this is not a one person show. Like, this is becoming quite magnetic, and the market is sort of pulled the direction of the business toward this course. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to have to double down on this, or we're not going to be able to see it grow. And we were able to get Ben to come back to the business and be a bigger part of it. So yeah, happy to share any part of that that's interesting. I'm
very interested. Not just in the Notion part. I use Notion too. For actually most of my production of anything, I write in Notion. On my weekly blog posts and stuff that then turn into podcasts and videos and stuff, I write them, I draft them in Notion too, because that's where all my data lives, where all my ideas are. I kind of pull it all together. So the integration principle is one that I have been following, kind of not even knowing that it exists, just because the platform allows me to do it. So the Notion part, super interesting. The business part of building on top of Notion, extremely interesting. Now, the part of building a course business on top of that, wow, right? There's just so much going on. So I want to talk to you about all of these three, because I'm also kind of scatterbrained and I want to know everything. But, I kind of want to start with the business part, because this podcast is for other founders, for people who want to build SaaS businesses, marketplaces, and info products. And I would assume that Notion Mastery is an info product that is kind of also expanding into a community, from what you just said, right? The kind of diagnosis self-help group that spontaneously formed around this product, which is awesome. I love communities, and communities of purpose where the purpose wasn't the one that actually turns out to be. This is something that I've actually heard a couple times in the past. I was talking to Daniel Vassallo about his small bets product, and he didn't want to start a community in the beginning because he just wanted it to be a course. But then over time, the people taking his course kind of formed the community by themselves and turn it into something where they now help each other kind of figure out if their bets are working or not, which is an amazing thing. And to know that your community helped you diagnose or help you figure out that you should be diagnosed, that is an amazing just effect, like an emergent effect from a community. So let's talk about the business side of this. How does one approach building an info product on top of a shifting platform? That's what interests me about Notion, because Notion has changed a lot in the past. So how do you approach building a product that stays on a platform that changes?
Yeah.
I don't know if you have strong opinions on this, Ben, if you want to jump in.
Not necessarily,
There's a lot here.
Not necessarily strong opinions, but this is actually what our focus is on a product level for Q1 is this. We've come to realize that because Notion moves so quickly, and as they've scaled, the last we heard, they're up to 450 employees, and that's scaled quite a bit in the last year. And so we have this, like, it's not really a course anymore. It's this thing where we're continually launching mini courses inside of this ecosystem now. And we just recently started doing a new event this past week, actually, that we're calling demo days. So whenever Notion does a feature release and has a list of features, I'm actually doing live workshops showing how to use the new features, and then like Q&A for how to use these things. So most of our actual work happens in the space of figuring out, like, what are people struggling with in real time, and then like sort of building mini products and testing little things around that. So for example, right now I'm building this new mini course that's all about the permissions and team spaces structure, because Notion recently did a pricing change and now everyone has access to team spaces. So we have this huge group of people who have been using Notion for years who have never been exposed to groups and team spaces. So my first thought is, okay, maybe I'll write a blog about how to use permissions properly in team spaces, because I have this like sort of consulting knowledge that a lot of people don't have. So write a blog, and then maybe I'll ship that. I'll do a live training in the middle of the of next month, we've got a live training plan to show this to our community. And then I will usually take the transcript or the outline for the live training and turn that into a course, a mini course inside of there. And then we can take segments of that, do YouTube videos based on little snippets of it. So it's like this constant like repurposing and remixing and rethinking like all of these different things. And so, once you've developed enough of a baseline, you can use this, what we call like community driven development, basically. So you can experiment with just little bits of like teaching somebody a 2-minute video how to do something. Oh, everybody was really excited about that. And that was really foundational knowledge that they captured. Oh, maybe we should do something more with that. And then that becomes a live training, and then it becomes a mini course. And so we've developed this system now where we can kind of do like, small bets. We can place these small bets on different mini features inside of there. And it's honestly a requirement now because Notion, and like as ambassadors, we get to see little early access on features, and there are features coming out that are going to totally change the way that people use Notion. And so we had to start thinking about like, we can't just have this static course, because as soon as they ship this feature, like it's going to change the way that we work in Notion completely, kind of thing. So, that's what we're doing right now, is rethinking like how do we restructure things so that we're sort of teaching alongside these new features coming out. And in terms of how we got there, I think the story of our business is kind of like, we started as a web development agency, 2 separate web development agencies that we combined together. And then we were a SaaS shop, and then we were a info marketing shop. And so we've been coaching. Like, our business has always been a bit of a chameleon, and we're just kind of moving where we're interested or where there is interest. And so that allows us to implement like little bits of these different business types within the Notion Mastery, umbrella.
Well, yeah, I think you did identify like one of our biggest challenges. How do we keep this course relevant? How are the systems that we are teaching still relevant when Notion implements a new feature that makes something so much easier to do? And we have to say, okay, which of these lessons do we need to go back and update? Is there an easier way to do this now? So that is kind of our central challenge, is how do we future-proof this course, make sure that we're teaching enough of the system level stuff such that if Notion makes a change, it's still relevant, it's still interesting, and we can supplement with those demo days and other events and that sort of thing. So we're definitely always thinking about that, is how do we future-proof it, but at the same time, we always have to be on top of what are those changes that are coming, and what is that going to mean, and what impact is that going to have for people coming to the course. I think another thing that we've had to also do is there's a mindset aspect to coming into a course that is you already know it's going to be changing. Like, you've signed up, and it's going to look different probably in a couple of weeks than it does now. Like, there's always going to be new things to add. So lessons around priming people around the mindset piece of that, and making sure that they know it's okay that this is going to change. You're going to have to be comfortable with the fact that things are going to look different. Your Notion space is going to look different next week, next month, even 6 months from now. That's actually part of the process. So that emergent quality of the more you use the thing, the more that you learn where the friction points are and what you need and don't need. So I try to frame it like a digital garden. Your Notion space is a digital garden. You're going to have to prune stuff. You're going to have to plant new seeds over here. And it takes a little bit to kind of shift people's perspective and unlearn traditional education where you're doing a course, you get a completion certificate, you're done. It's like, this is a little bit more exploratory and choose your own adventure. And that can be very uncomfortable for some people. So we try to prime that as much as possible when people first join the course.
That sounds like something that I noticed in myself, that when I initially saw Notion, I thought, oh yeah, I'm going to put stuff in here and this is kind of how it looks forever.
It's going to be
but
perfect.
Then I quickly learned that the platform itself made that impossible, but that was a good thing. I think it feels like change is not necessarily a bad thing, particularly not when it comes to knowledge and how we connect it, right? How we interact with it. Mm-hmm. Exactly. But that makes me wonder, like, what is the thing that people usually get wrong about Notion beyond it changing over time? Like, is there one thing that you notice in the people, in your students, that is a misconception that a lot of people bring to the table when they join the course?
Yeah, I think the perfectionism is a huge one.
I think
people like... Yeah.
I mean, I think our main sell on our landing page, for example, is that templates are not a system, and people come to the course thinking that I'm going to get a fully fleshed out, finished ecosystem, basically a SaaS in Notion that is fully functioning. But that's where, especially with my consulting clients, they'll go grab a business OS template or whatever, install it, and then nobody knows how to use it. And then when they want to deviate from what's provided, they don't actually know how to extend that system. So it's very much back to that SaaS provider relationship where you're dependent on a company providing you with the tools that you need to run your business. And what happens is that, and I say this a lot in my consulting stuff, the systems and workflows that you build in Notion fall out of the way that your company does work. So going back to those permaculture principles, like the first one is this like observational principle that you need to observe the landscape that you have available to you. And so a lot of basically the consulting I do in Notion is like, I don't do any building without doing an observational phase, like, or a discovery phase, and figuring out like, how does your team actually work? Where are you making decisions? Who's making those decisions? Who's joining these meetings? And so a lot of the way that you actually end up using Notion is usually reflective of your styles and your coworkers' styles and stuff. So I think the biggest mistake that most people make is that they don't use that observational phase. They go right to the building stuff. And that's what Notion Mastery, we have this tracks journey where you go through 3 levels of sort of building out. And the building process it's like this time, there's like these little checks along the way where you're actually like thinking about the way that you think, the way that you do work. And I think that's reflective of Marie's style, where she works based off her energy levels rather than priorities and your traditional, like, Eisenhower matrix or whatever they're called. I always get that name wrong. That kind of stuff, where Marie's like, will think in themes or energy levels, and it's just a different way of thinking. And I think that's why a lot of times it resonates really strongly for folks with neurodivergent minds, because it's a lot more adaptable, I think, in the way that we teach. So
yeah, and I think, again, that need to get it perfect, that I'm going to take this course and then get the system right. And it's very tempting to do that. But I like to think of Notion as more so of almost like a personal development tool or a self-discovery tool, more so than a productivity tool. Like, what are you learning about yourself and how you work in this process? And so getting people comfortable with the mess a little bit of like, what is emerging as you are building this and as you're using it? What are you noticing about yourself and why? It's a powerful tool for reflection if you're willing to take that extra moment. Yeah. So I think just helping people overcome that urge to get it perfect, and that the mess is part of the process. As we talked about in the beginning of this session, the mess is a necessary part. And so I think even giving people permission to say, it's okay to just focus on the knowledge capture piece for now, for the first couple of weeks. You don't need to worry about productivity and your task management and whatever. Let's just start with one thing at a time. This can be a messy page. It's okay. People really struggle with that. Oh, this page looks so messy and my databases, where do they Don't worry about it. We're just going to start here first, and we're going to get to that part. So that's really a struggle for people. I think, again, they want those really picture perfect templates, but when people actually start using it, again, they don't know enough about how they work to be able to customize it. So that's where I want to get people thinking more deeply about how they work.
Oh, that's very interesting. I'm wondering at this point, that when people come into your course, do they usually have like an over-engineered Notion setup, or do they have an under-engineered Notion? Because simplicity can be both, right? It can be too simple, or it can be not simple enough. So what do you see in your students when they come join the course?
We get such a humongous range, and again, because what we're talking about is work and life integration, mastering workflows across all these different places. We get people from all over the world, every age group, students, professionals, gardeners, everyone is in there. And so people are coming in with very, very different intentions. And I think that is one of the major challenges of a course, even from a marketing perspective. How do you speak to an audience that is so diverse, and their motivations and their intentions are so diverse? So that's definitely a challenge. But we get people who have never, maybe just downloaded the app, or their friend told them about it. They just heard about it. So they're coming in from ground zero. Then you have other people who say, I'm 10 out of 10 Notion. I just want to optimize that last little bit, and everything in between. But Ben, I don't know if you think from an average standpoint, if you think most people tend to be sort of over-engineered a little bit, or they're coming in with a little bit of a mess, and they're like, I know this isn't working for me. Where do I start?
At least from the consulting side, with the business side of things, I think people very quickly, they build something that's very, they're either grabbing a template or just grabbing something from Notion's template library, and then they immediately go to scaling that to 100 employees. And that can be really challenging when you haven't really established the good practices to begin with within the company. We got very lucky at Precision Nutrition, for example, in that the engineering team kind of was using GitHub for managing our docs and onboarding docs, and it was just not really working very well. And I got tasked with figuring out Notion, and we started with just the engineering team, and so we built like some shared practices. We really documented it really well, like how to use it and where to get things. And then what I did was I started onboarding other teams, and they basically had to go through this process where I did a mini training for them, showing them how to use the basics and things like that. And then I would give them a dashboard that they could then use, and then I would like open up access to that dashboard and allow them to edit it. And so for me, the biggest mistake that most businesses make is they have these things called full access Notion workspaces, where the newest employee gets added as a member and they can literally delete the entire sidebar. And because people, and that's why I'm working on this permissions and team spaces thing, because that's a huge, you miss these kind of, these small little things that make huge impactful changes down the line, where, you basically end up with, in programming terms, a lot of debt, that will have to be cleaned up in some way. So yeah, I think most people tend to be in the over-engineered when they come to the course phase. It probably leans more towards that than under-engineered, because the folks that are just learning Notion aren't like, our course is it's a 12-month program. There's live events, and, it's more training focused than course focused. And so it's a steep investment. So I think people that are just discovering Notion probably aren't going to drop the course price on quite yet, but when they discover like how powerful it is and how frustrated they're getting, then that number starts to come, be relatively speaking a little bit more, stomachable, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the reasons I was able to thrive with Notion was because I already had a bit of that systems know-how. So if people have not been exposed to any systems and they're just trying to figure out Notion, it is going to be a hot mess. And so I think the burden is on the user really to kind of enforce their systems on the software, right? And so that's where I think that biggest challenge was. So the course is able to give people like a scaffold on top of which they can build. And so it really
something you
depends
just said
how,
made me realize most people are, when they start, like Asana is a great example of a software that you use. You are a user of the software. All of the tools and the workflows are sort of provided for you. So you can read documentation and kind of follow along with the steps and use it. Whereas Notion and a lot of no-code tools have introduced this concept of like, are you a user or are you a builder? And now for a lot of people, you're both. You are a user builder, whatever that is. And so that means that like you have to start thinking about experience design, data capture, like how do I actually visualize my data? How do I get what I want out of that data? Because a lot of most Notion workspaces are just databases of information, which, you could open Google Sheets and do that. But actually visualizing that data over time or in context is very challenging, and the Notion is not providing those contexts for you. You have to build that yourself. So there's a higher level, this prosumer idea where you're now having to build your own resources to do your work. That's kind of a newer concept, I think, and that's where the challenge arises and why people really want that like real-time support. I think one of the things that people ask for a lot in our community is like, what's everybody else doing? Is this hard for everybody or just me? Like, how are you solving this problem? And so there's this like, that's why we're doing these demo days, is not just showing what the software can do, but also examples of what we're doing, examples of what our students are doing. We have the advantage that we get to learn from our students as well. Some of them go well outside of what we're doing in terms of building, and we're like, oh, cool, that's super amazing that you learned how to do that. We'll start doing that too, or we're learning at the same time. So it's super powerful for that kind of experience.
That sounds like you have a built-in network effect here by people just bringing in the information back into the knowledge network, and you can then disseminate it out. I was wondering about how you market or advertise this course, this product in particular, because it sounds like you're targeting a pretty like highly functional group of people with this, like not just somebody who wants to kind of set up Notion for themselves a little bit, but for people who actually want to make it work, not just for individual people, but for whole organizations. So how do you approach marketing your course slash call it info product empire that you're currently building? How does that work? How do you approach it?
Yeah. The channels that have worked the best historically, YouTube. So I guess that's probably how the course interest first started, was committing to doing a YouTube video every single week for 12 weeks. And I was just demoing some aspect of it, like, oh, here's how I manage my projects. Here's how I personal business, whatever. I was just showing every week one different way of using it. In the beginning, I didn't realize how deep my knowledge was. And so I was sharing these videos and people being like, that's nice, but how on earth do you do that? And so I didn't realize that just demoing a thing was not actually showing someone how to do the thing. So those comments and questions that would come in on YouTube are going to keep feeding. I was like, oh, wow, there's lots of content to produce here. So I could probably have content ideas forever. So YouTube was definitely primarily the way I could at least demonstrate my thinking. And then Twitter became a really great way to show sort of beautiful visual screen caps of what these spaces looked like. And so I could just post something on Twitter and being like, here's how I do my weekly review, show these really beautiful screenshots. And people were like, how do you build this? And I was like, you can learn more about my course over here. So in the beginning, I mostly just drove people to my list on YouTube. I think very quickly we were able to get 10,000 signups on my list within 3 months, which was pretty substantial for me from having maybe a 500-person list before all of this Notion stuff. And then once we had the course available, we switched that sign up for our list to the check out the course and kind of switch that. So YouTube descriptions, and those, boxes to like check out the next video, getting someone just going down the rabbit hole of your content is wonderful. And then Twitter, I think, was the next big one. And then starting to email the list. It took a long time, I think, before we did any kind of real email marketing. But I'd say YouTube was primarily, and then it evolved into search and referrals, people telling their friends. And then we set up an affiliate program. And Ben, I know, Ben's doing more of the data side of things now too. So I don't know if you're kind of seeing any trends shifting, but I still think YouTube is primarily.
We do a lot of search engine marketing, but we've really only started trying to do some SEO stuff with like actual attribution and things like that. We've never done any paid advertising in our entire history of our company, and I think we'll probably never do it. It's just not something that we're comfortable or like maybe we could bring somebody on to help us with that, but it's kind of outside of my comfort zone a little bit in terms of how we market things. A big part, the first 6 months when I came back to the company, I had a SavvyCal link that I just was kind of open. And so I would just do 30 minutes and I was doing 2-3 calls a day with organizations that were trying to use Notion. And usually in that 30 minutes, I would unlock some things for somebody. I'd be like, well, have you thought about doing X, Y, and Z? And they're just like, oh my God, you just saved me so much time. And like we started building this database of sort of principles like that, this is a good practice, this is a good practice, and so on and so forth. So like doing tons of interviews, and also like seeing what other ambassadors and Notion's other channel, which is Notion Champions. Those are the people that work at a company, a larger organization, enterprise level, that are sort of spearheading Notion work at their organization. So talking to those folks, I started doing, in the last 6 months, I started doing what I call the Notion monetization mastermind within the ambassador community. So we've got about 40 people now. And so we're all just like talking and doing lean coffee format style meetings and talking about commonalities and in what we're seeing in monetization of templates and consulting services. So, it's kind of it's a multifaceted effort to just draw attention to what we're doing and things like that. So I think each one of our team members, go ahead.
I think I also forgot a major. I was going to say our office hours together, Ben, that we did. I totally forgot about that. Like actually partnering with Notion and having some like sort of endorsed by Notion events. Like that was, I think, pretty big for us early on too. I totally forgot about that.
That's something that I really was going to ask you as the very next thing. So thanks for bringing it up, because you seem to have partnered with Notion on some level from a fairly early stage. And I wonder, like joining the ambassador program, like did that happen before you released the course, or was that something that came after?
I think it came after. So I think, Ben, you and I organized a webinar. It was like August of 2019, I think. That was our very first. I had never done a webinar before, but I had so many people saying, if you make a course on Notion, I will give you money. I was like, okay, there's something here. Like the market is begging for this. I was really scared to be on camera, really scared to be on video. Like the idea of doing a webinar was like definitely not my comfort zone, but I knew it was kind of the future. Like I was going to have to get comfortable doing this. So we scheduled a webinar, and I think we called it Getting Started with Notion. And it was pretty much just like, here's our crazy advanced Notion workspace. Like it was really not a getting started with Notion. It was the opposite of that. So people were like, galaxy brain emoji, but also how do you build? Like, it was definitely way, way too advanced, I think, for what we had thought it was going to be. And it caught the attention of Notion. I think the Notion COO reached out like a few days later or something and just said, hey, we saw that webinar that you did. Who is this girl that knows our product better than our team does? Like, can we chat? And I was like, oh my gosh,
I think it was that
the COO of Notion
he
wants
invited
to talk.
you to
It was
do
so
an internal
exciting.
presentation of what you had been building in Notion, and not yet. Okay.
Well, not yet. So they saw our webinar first, and then they were sort of like, hey, how could we, like, there's something here. How could we collaborate in a way? And I think we had agreed that we will do some office hours with Marie. And it was sort of on Notion's Crowdcast channel. It would sort of be on behalf of them. So that definitely really helped me grow my audience. And after the course launched, and I think after they saw that I had basically pivoted my whole business to say, you know what, I'm going to try this. Let's just see if I kind of change this chapter of business and say, we're going to double down on Notion. We're going to make the course and just see where this goes, because it seems like there's something really magical here that is really, there's a hungry crowd here. It would be kind of easy to serve. So I was like, let's just try it. And I think within a few months of launching the course, like it was already making 10,000 a month very quickly. And I thought, okay, like this is the easiest money I've ever made. Like, this is wild. I need to double down in this and make it better. I need to figure out where this is going to go. And that's when, Notion asked, like, would you be willing to share kind of how you're using it, like the course, all of that good stuff. And so I put together a presentation.
Small, yeah,
I think their team might have been 50 people at the time when I put that presentation together.
Yeah.
And it was like, here's how much revenue the course has made. Here's like the most popular YouTube videos. Here's the use cases that I'm seeing. And just this, it was presented to them in Notion. So I was basically screen sharing a Notion page that had all the data and the stats and everything. And kind of, I was very transparent with them. Here's how much my template revenue is making. Here's how many students are in the course. And, he said their team was very surprised. Like their average employee wasn't aware of even some of the ways that they could use the product. So they were just like, how can we continue to, have this like mutually beneficial relationship where, they can't necessarily they could sponsor me, or we could figure out like a payment model. But what they did was they gave us a free enterprise account, which allowed us to host the course on Notion. And again, we're consultants, we're pros, like, we're obviously a marketing support for them, but we're not paid by Notion to do that. And I think that was a better move. Like, I think then when we're marketing and we're talking about the course and the power of the tool, it's because we really freaking love it, not because Notion is paying us to say that. So I think both Notion and us, we've been sort of like, okay, well, we've explored, like, could that happen? But we just think it would be better for us to just stay as an unpaid, we're just motivated because we just really love what the tool can do for us. And that's worked for us.
Great. That is a great way of building a partnership that is not tainted in some way, right? It feels very aligned. Like they don't have to deal with educational complexity because they have a product that can be complicated unless somebody tells you how to use it right, and that's what you do. So they don't have to do it. Perfect, right? I think it's a win-win situation. In my book, honestly, I would rather have somebody who really loves the product, not building the product, but using the product, talk about how to use the product.
I think
there's always
Notion has really
there.
landed on something really special with the ambassadors program. I think a lot of SaaSes are looking at that and going like, oh, like, they really help with those early stage growth things to get people onto the platform. And, when you have these really complex no code platforms that, require, if you want to, you've got your enterprise customers and they really need a lot of support for getting up and running and stuff like that. So you really want to build that ambassadorship. And also the certified consultant program has really been impactful for Notion, because then they can just be like, hey, you should talk to these folks over here about doing the consulting. And so it's again, they're not being paid by Notion, but they're just delivering the consulting directly to the end user. But it's a win-win for both partners, because you're getting the enterprise customer, and then Notion is getting that sweet recurring revenue from 200 person organizations. It's a really great way to grow SaaS, I think, these days, is that building a really good system for ambassadorship and consulting.
Yeah, it's a quality assurance level, right? You vet the people that you recommend, so you know that the quality is high. And that is actually something that I can literally see this. As I'm recording this with you, I see that both of you are in really nice and friendly looking rooms that I would like to sit in as well. It feels like you've understood that the visual power, not just of Notion itself, and it being able to, you being able to screenshot it and show that and invite people into your business, but also how you present yourself. That is very inviting. Is that something you're doing intentionally? How come your backgrounds look so inviting and amazing? What's happening?
They are among the best YouTubers in the world when it comes to technology. I'm not there yet. My YouTube channel has 150 subscribers or something. But Marie's is very.
We'll get you there. We'll get you there.
She has a big subscribership, and that polishedness is really, I think, actually quite important. And you look at folks like Thomas Frank, August Bradley, they both have unbelievably beautiful video setups that is just really, really quality, and their editing is really good. The pacing is really good. When it comes to those pieces of educational content, keeping people's attention in an educational environment is super, super important. So that the editing and the pacing and the way it looks, and being able to show what you're doing on screen at the same time, but also seeing that person, it's really important from a teaching perspective. So I think, in the future, the best courses and the best, businesses are going to be generally based around some kind of highly polished, content creation. And I know, talking to Thomas Frank, he'll say just start recording. And Marie did the same thing with her videos, where she did 100 days of video, and you can look at her videos from 2 years ago and her videos today, and it's the leap is incredible. So yeah, I do think that's very intentional.
But also, Ben has a fine arts degree, right? A lot of people don't know that. Ben did a fine arts degree, and I went to design school. So I think we are inherently...
It's pretty important to us, yeah.
We are designers at heart, and design really matters, and just how things feel. I think I don't know if I'm more sensitive to environmental cues or not, but just how I feel when I open up my Notion dashboard matters to me. So I will spend time making a nice header, doing an icon set that feels good. So when I open it, it's not just getting my tasks done, because that's not how I move through my day. I'm mindful of how do I feel day to day, moment to moment. That matters to me. So could I make the work that I'm doing feel really fun, to feel expansive? That matters to me. And I think those things maybe can impact people in ways they're not even aware of. And if you don't have that design background, you might not even know that that's what's happening there, is that the way something looks is impacting the way you're interpreting it. So I think it's kind of baked in, I think, with how Ben and I work and see the world.
Yeah, particularly if you're working on energy levels, if you're not a priority person, but at how do I feel in this moment? What do I want to do? Right? If you're a person like that. And I have this half and half, I think. There are days when I'm an energy person and days when I can do structured work, which is confusing because no system works all the time. But,
exactly.
In that moment, it really matters. Visuals really matter. And I'm also trying to improve upon this, because it's not only how I feel, it's also how I am perceived as, right? As a creator, if you do stuff, the way people see what you're doing, that influences how they understand what you're doing as well. And obviously this takes a lot of effort to get right. And you are absolutely right. You just start recording, you do whatever you want to do, and you get better over time. But at a certain point, I feel this effort eclipses what the capacity of one person or two people can provide. So let's talk a bit about the business behind the course. Let's talk about how you manage this. Do you have a team? Like, if so, where are those people? What are they doing? I'm very interested in what is needed to keep such a course, a long-term event, running and growing.
Yeah, when I launched the course, it was mostly just me, but I was bringing in a virtual assistant, and it was very clear, like right in those beginning weeks, I'm like, oh, okay, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this by myself. And Notion also didn't have the enterprise capabilities and invite codes and things. So I was hosting a course on Notion, having to manually invite people in as guests. So I did this, pilot, but that's like someone buys and hopefully I see the notification in time and then invite them so it's not too big of a gap. And like, I was just figuring it out as I went, for sure. It was definitely a bit of chaos. So having our current director of ops, Georgia, we initially hired her as a sort of virtual assistant. And so for those first couple months, she was really helping me with that. And each month I would just kind of increase her support. And it was growing very fast. I think I worked with Georgia for almost a year, before we started talking about maybe bringing her on full time. So she was a freelancer. She had other clients as well. And I was like, I feel like we could probably fill your days with a good chunk of time if you were interested. I don't know how you feel about continuing to run your own business. And she much prefers to be the person behind the scenes. She doesn't like marketing herself. She's like, I would be so happy to do that. So we went through a little bit of a transition there, and she became our first full-time employee. So I think Georgia was working with us for almost a year full-time after that, before Ben came back on board as well. So we are 3 full-time people, but we've brought in other contractors to help us with community support. When students are asking questions in the forum, like, how do we make sure that we're making sure that students are heard, and updating curriculum, making new video. Like, there's just lots of processes obviously behind the scenes that need to be managed. And so we're a pretty flexible team. And I mean, Ben and I do a lot, like we wear a lot of different hats. Ben is handling a lot of the like financial and accounting and whatever, but also the tech side and managing the websites. Like, there's obviously a lot of moving parts and pieces. I think both Ben and I tend to be more generalist. Like, we love working on many different things. We really enjoy that, doing the design, making the sales pages. That's part of the fun. But there's lots of other skills I think that we've kind of like helped other. Yeah,
we generally kind of like
fill those gaps. So
go in and out of like scaling and retracting quite frequently. So we'll bring on like 2 or 3 people. Like right now we have somebody that works with Marie and crafting the newsletters, and then Georgia sets those up in ConvertKit. We also have people that we hire quarterly to do like kind of marketing and search engine optimization passes, where we get like an audit, like a roadmap of an execution roadmap. So I think a lot of times, as owners, we're not super great at like knowing what to do next. And so we hire outside help to tell us like, what do we have? What can we do next? And give us like, here's a prioritized punch list of things that you could tackle. Because, Marie and I tend to, jump around to a bunch of different things, and, Georgia tries to manage us. But I think we really like this model of bringing people on to do specific, like one-off things. And then we can bring them back like later. So we have, folks that will run workshops for us, lead our trainings at times, and things like that. So it's kind of a, and I think right now we have, so it's 3 of us throughout BC mostly. And then we have our support lead in the community. Rani is in the Philippines and Australia at times. So we have this nice like spread out where we've got support when we're asleep, and then when we're up, we're also doing support in the community and things like that. So yeah, it's a pretty global business. Like we have customers all over the world in every time zone. So, and that's another challenge, is like, how do we run live events that are everybody can join and participate in? And so, yeah.
That sounds not just like a business challenge, but it also sounds like a, separation of work time and personal time kind of challenge. Particularly, I come from building a business as a couple, right? Like my co-founder Danielle, she's my girlfriend. So before we sold the business, she was my co-founder. Now she's just my girlfriend, which is great. But there's this different dynamic in a business like this, where you spend all time together during your work hours, and then they kind of extend in your personal time. How do you deal with that? It's like, how do you deal with the couple issue, or is that an issue for you at all?
I mean, it's always an issue. I would say we deal with that by having regular check-ins with both each other and with our team. We go to couples therapy. We go to individual therapy. We love therapy. I think therapy is possibly the best business investment you can make. It's super invaluable. And some of the stuff we're doing recently, like we've been restructuring the way that we're doing the internal work now. And Marie, I don't remember where the source of the term was, but we've been exploring this thing called a DDO, which is a deliberately developmental organization. And so we're actually like specifically mandating that everybody that we work with works on improving themselves, giving them time and budget as part of their like actual compensation to do that work. And so we've sort of tasked the director of ops, Georgia, to hold us accountable to that as well. So she actually and recently was like, how would you feel, Marie, if I made you take time off? Like you have to take time off. And we're like, okay, we're empowering you to tell us that we have to take a vacation or whatever, because Marie doesn't take time off. She just doesn't. And that's part of her success is, she's just an animal when it comes to getting things done. So yeah, like all of those things are being very intentional about reflection, and recovery, and thinking about like what do we need to change to do better work and keep this going kind of thing is super important, I think, in any organization, especially a small team and especially, husband and wife led teams.
It sounds like you're not focusing on massive growth at all costs, which is generally a good idea for any, business that wants to stay sustainable and calm out of all things. And the thing you said earlier really, really brings that into very, very sharp focus for me. The fact that you expand and contract. And in many ways, that actually sounds like yet another permaculture lesson to me. Like a system just breathes. It takes in air, it releases, and breathes back in and air. And I find that incredibly interesting, because you seem to have applied these learnings from these cyclical systems all over the place. That's a wonderful thing to see. Like in your business life, personal life, likely too, in what the business translates into, and like the product itself. That's just a wonderful thing to see, how such a gardening-based system can be applied in so many other ways.
I really like that, the breathing metaphor, because businesses are living ecosystems. And if your business takes on that rigidity, you will lose that elasticity. And I think that's really important to us. Our business is called Okie Dokie, but like I said, we've been a web design agency. We've been a SaaS shop for 5 years. Like we ran a SaaS that, at one point was doing 5,000 MRR. So not hugely successful, but it paid one of our salaries and things like that at the time. And yeah. And like, the ability to be elastic and change and try something new is super important to us. I don't like the Notion thing is exciting to me because I've loved working in Notion, and solving, customer problems really, keeps me going. But like, I can't imagine doing Notion in 20 or 30 years from now, like when we're still alive, but who knows, maybe it'll be something totally different.
That can be intimidating for people that join us too, right? Because I think we're not necessarily attached to the specifics. It's like we help people in so many different ways. And even if Notion disappears, I'm like, there's so many other skill sets that we both have, and we know how to help people in so many different ways that I hope that these learnings are applicable beyond Notion. And so someone joining the team, like we're just not a rigid structure. We're not rigid on the rules. Like we are very flexible people, and we're always just asking in the moment what's working, what's not working. So for other people, there's a bit of, I think, unlearning that might have to happen to be able to go with the flow the way that we do in our business. And so it won't be for everyone, but as Ben pointed out, like this is our livelihood. It's not just our business, it's our life too. And so like the money that we make together as the business, like this is serving hopefully our future retirement. Like we have to think bigger about kind of what does this mean for us, because this is how we're spending our time. It's how we're spending our life, and we want it to matter. So we try to, I think, be very mindful of what are we doing with this thing, and are we feeling good about this? And is it pushing us as people to be better, to be, the best that we can be?
Do you regularly check in with each other? And because like Danielle and I, we're doing this too. And we were doing this during the time when we built the business. So to have these little tiny micro summits for ourselves where we would have essentially goal setting retreats, right? That was the idea.
Yeah.
And do you do this on a regular basis as well?
Yeah, like I feel like
probably not as much as we should. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think we go through phases, right? Where like if something difficult happens, when a challenge comes, we're like, oh, you know what? We've been neglecting this part of our business. Like we often say like, oh, every Monday we'll do our check-in, and then sometimes we don't, or we skip it. And so I think we go through these ebbs and flows. And I think right now in this season of our business, and all through December, we've said like, we're talking internal roles and responsibilities. How do we do things? Like really looking at our processes and doing more of those check-ins. So I think right now we're having way deeper conversations, way more of those conversations than we have in a really long time. And we're looking at how do we bake this in to make this more of a process, even something like, do we do a quarterly retreat where we spend a week and we're just focused on kind of our vision for the business and how we're feeling about things. So we're always just asking ourselves like, yeah, what's working, what's not working. And I think we could do a better job of standardizing that a little bit and being more.
I think we're both very
structured.
all in people. So we're not super great at the day-to-day rote tasks and things like that. And it's like this thing where, we just like once we've decided together that we're doing something together, it's very much like a full speed ahead, get out of the way kind of thing. And I've seen Marie do this many times where when she decides on something, it's like, just move aside. I'm not even going to try to hold her back or see what she's doing, because she just gets really, 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 amped up and just flying ahead and learning everything in front of her and creating new products and all this stuff. And, we're both kind of like that, where we, and I Marie just used the word this season of our business. And I think that's really important to think of it that way, that we have these like seasons where right now we're just taking a break and rethinking some things. And, we need to take a step back and go back to that observational phase again and see what, kind of what's happening here, what's appearing, what's important, what's not important, what can we let go of? And so, we do this where we'll go for a season where we just work mindlessly, and then a season where we basically don't work at all, and we're just sort of like recuperating and recovering. So winter tends to be a good time for that.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a really good mix of flexibility and assertiveness, right? You know that you can change stuff, but you also know what you're going for. And that combination of being flexible and assertive, that makes me wonder, do you consider yourselves unemployable at this point?
Not at all. I mean, I went and worked.
I do.
I think Marie might be, but before
How dare you?
before I came back to work with Marie, Marie mentioned at the beginning that I was working for a nutrition and coaching company called Precision Nutrition. And I worked there for 2 years as like kind of a software dev / I was doing a little bit of product management type work there as well. And I've absolutely loved working there. And I love that seasonality of like, again, the expanding, contracting thing where like my focus is very narrow, and then I make my focus broad again. And I like to do that repeatedly. So I'll work on a software product for 5 years, and then I'll go and be more like a, like larger company, and then small, just focused on, Rails and Ember, which was what I was doing there at that company. I think that elasticity really helps you identify where you fit in certain different places and things like that. So I definitely think I'm super employable because I have a certain skill set, but I'm also probably difficult to employ, I would say, because I have that like broader outlook, and I tend to start looking at different things in a way that might not just be like developer-y. And so that can be a challenge employability wise, that I can be frustrating to work with, because
it's hard for Ben to stay in his lane.
Yeah, I can't. It's really difficult for me to not want to solve a lot of problems, and AI tend to step on toes a lot. So it does help to run your own business when you're that type of person.
I love how honest you are, like in stating this and with yourself in recognizing it. That sounds like you did a lot of work, and I'm not surprised you are a fan of therapy in this regard, because that is usually the place where the work is done, right? Or where the work gets triggered. So as you are, for me at this point, very much the embodiment of the indie founder that is not locking themselves into the box, which you might do, right? Like if you look at all the people in the indie hacker community, like they build a business, they build another business, and they just keep building businesses and consider themselves unemployable. I asked these questions because I wanted to see how far the elasticity goes, right? Because some people might want to do many things but never go back to work again, or some people are looking to do the indie hacker thing to find a job at a company they always wanted to work to. So it's a very flexible approach, and I love your leaving the options open approach. Marie, how about you? What's going on with you?
I think it's been so long, and I think never say never, but I think just the flexibility and freedom that we have running this business together brings me so much joy. It's really hard to imagine how I might plug into another company, but again, I'm just always open to it looking different than it looks now, whether it's interesting partnerships or whatever. Like I'm deeply interested in collaborating with amazing people, and whatever shape that takes, that's okay. But I certainly don't think I'd be employable by a traditional employer. It would have to look pretty freaking different.
I think this environment, the general climate is changing with the nature of remote work, and that I think a lot of companies are going to have to realize that you are, that more and more you would, if you wanted to enjoy the fruits of somebody like Marie's labor, there would be a very specific type of engagement that you would have to do. And I think, a lot of times that might be why maybe people aren't actually employees, but they're more of like partners, and the nature of the engagement of the contract is different. And we found that, that's true for our own business, that sometimes small little ventures are really good, and sometimes full commitments to employment are really good. Like, I think a more modern company, remote-based company, or a distributed company, as it were, is gonna know when to like really how to attract different types of personalities, and the engagement models are going to have to shift to adapt to that a little bit.
Yeah, it really helps putting yourself out there too, right? Like to show what you want to do and what you don't want to do in this remote world where everybody could potentially hire you if only they knew what you're doing. And I think both of you do this in an interesting way on Twitter, at least from what I see. You're pretty outspoken about it too, right? You're essentially building in public in to a certain degree. And I think that's an important method to find the right people to partner with, and it's also a great way of finding customers, I guess, because I would assume that your personality's YouTube channel is a good example, right? You bring in customers through who you are and through what you want to do and how you do it. And I think both of you do this in a wonderful way, and that's the reason that I want to end this conversation by asking you, where should people go to figure out who you are, what you do, and how well you do it? Where do you want people to go?
Well, first of all, thank you for saying that. It's very kind of you. For me, it's probably Twitter. I think that's where I have my typical, I think I'm pretty opinionated and about software and about things and about systems. And, that's where I just post a lot of, my thoughts and things. And then I'm hoping my YouTube channel over time. But, mine tends to be highly technical, and I'm doing like API examples. So it's a little less of the, growth type stuff where it's like how to use Notion. So, but hopefully, get very specific engagement there would be great.
No, you put it out there.
Similarly, I think Twitter is kind of the place where like the free form thinking and even like testing out ideas and even the permaculture ideas, just sort of testing out resonance. I like to do that on Twitter. YouTube is obviously a little bit more Notion focused, so you can find me on YouTube there at Marie Poulin. Yeah. And then our business website is weareokidoki.com. That's where we do a lot of our. Well, I guess it's not a super active site, but it's kind of like the home of who we are as a couple and kind of what our business is.
It still looks like we're a web agency.
Still in progress, yeah.
You just update that.
Yeah, it's quite noticeable. Like it's half web agency, half Notion in course.
It needs some loving. It's a little outdated. We'll get there. It's on the list. But and then if other people want to know more about like the sort of permaculture side, the more personal thinking that I do around business tends to happen on my personal site, mariepoulin.com. So if you're curious kind of what I'm up to there, you can sign up for the newsletter there.
Those are several things that I highly recommend for people to follow because both of you are inspirational and you have a really good grasp of how to build things that last. Mm-hmm. And it's noticeable. And I really appreciate that. Also, as a person who wants to build things that last, you are an inspiration to me too. So thank you so much for being on my show today. That was really nice. Thanks for sharing everything that you shared. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's an honor.
Thank you.
And that's it for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Bootstrap Founder. You can find me on Twitter at ArvidKahl, ARVIDKAHL. You find my books, my Twitter course there as well. And if you want to support me in the show, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, get the podcast in your podcast player of choice, and leave a rating and a review by going to ratethispodcast.com/founder. Any of this will truly help the show. So thank you for listening today and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.